It's all you,
All
little
right.
brother.
Welcome. That little button in the corner of my screen means we are live. It is the first Wednesday of the month. Welcome to the Fire Engineering partner with ISFSI. First Wednesday of the month. Focus on training. Humpday Hangout. As always, we're happy to have you here. My name's Brad French. I'm on the board of directors for the ISFSI, the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, and I'm also a captain in the Dayton, Ohio Fire Department. As always, very, very happy to be here. One of our normal co-hosts, Steve Pegram, chief down in Goshen, Ohio, is not able to be on with us today. And another normal co-host, Aaron Heller, out of Hamilton Township up in New Jersey, I think might be on at some point, but I'm not sure. We'll tag him in if he's able to get on. The focus of today's Hangout is called Passing the Torch, mentoring and training younger members on the fire department. So I think there's a few different directions we're going to go with this today, but we should have some great discussion as we progress over the next hour. Keep in mind, hashtag FETalk. We'll monitor on social media. The Chief Halton or myself or the fire engineering staff in the background will keep an eye on the hashtag FETalk on Twitter and Facebook if you have anything that you would like to discuss or like to contribute as we go. So we'll go down. We'll run the gamut of introductions here in a little while. But first and foremost, I want to pass it over to the man in charge, our Chief Elder, Chief Bobby Halton.
Hi, thanks for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. Just a couple of quick programming notes. EMS today, registration is open. Fantastic opportunities, very affordable education. You can get a plethora of CE by attending it. We'll be in National Harbor this year, which is just outside of DC, an incredible facility with incredible entertainment stuff for the evenings, multitude of restaurants and bars, great hotel. Will be at the Gaylord. We're going to have 3 days of incredible EMS education. The Fools will be having an event there. There'll be all kinds of stuff going on. We got some great keynoters lined up. It's going to be a really wonderful time in February. And then, of course, we've got FDIC registration will be opening up soon. We've got a new housing bureau, so I apologize. So there's been some housing stuff going on. I've been getting lots of phone calls and emails. But FDIC registration is going up soon, and we'd love to have you all back at FDIC. So we hope to see everybody there. So that's happening. The Texas LODD Symposium, which we'll be at the end of this month. If you've never gone to the Texas LODD Symposium, it's one of the most unique conferences, symposiums in the American Fire Service. Gordon Graham will be there. Billy Goldfeder will be there. John Pronesti will be there. Mike Teague. A multitude of great presentations. It's going to be the end of October. I believe it's the 28th, 29th, and 30th. And incredible. If you can't be there, you can live stream it, and you can actually archive it so that you can show it to your department for the entire year. There's 3 days worth of presentations, and they're all just phenomenal. So the Texas LODD, Texas Fire Chiefs LODD Symposium, incredible opportunity. Please take advantage of that. Live stream it or attend. We'll be in, I believe, Hurst, Texas, which is a really cool place. It's just outside. It's inside of Dallas, really. Dallas has kind of surrounded it as those big cities do, and gobbled it up. But it's a really cool place. So that's all the commercial stuff that I have. And the society just wrapped up their conference, and as always, an incredible event. They had some really incredible presentations. And you talk about mentoring. Some of them were just, spellbinding. I've spoken to a few of the folks who presented there. If you're not a member of the International Association of Fire Service Instructors, you're really doing yourself a disservice. We're all teachers, and they have a plethora of tools and conferences and opportunities for you to grow as an individual. And if we're going to talk about mentoring, the number one key in mentoring is really helping people open themselves to the possibilities that they have within themselves that they're not aware of. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What any one man can do, I can do." And what that meant was it's all about application, right, of energy, time and energy. And so please join the society. It's really easy to do. Go to the website, click on it. Lee or somebody will get right back with you. If you come to FDIC, basically it's a wash because you get a discount to FDIC, which more than covers your registration as a member. We hold a great meeting there. And we also run a program where if you haven't taught, the society and I are working this year to select the members who are new, who've never spoken before, and the society helps support them through a mentoring program, through being an instructor at FDIC. So if you want to learn how to instruct better, if you want to grow, the number one thing to do before we hand it over to our guests who know more about it than I do is join the society. Seriously, do something for yourself. Do something for your personal development, and the society will help you do that.
Chief, I can't thank you enough. I couldn't have said that any better myself. That was we did, as you mentioned, just come off a great week up in Tinley Park, Illinois, just south of Chicago, doing some instructor professional development. And I can't say enough about the ISFSI. One of the regular co-hosts on here that I mentioned earlier, Steve Pegram, was instrumental in bringing me and mentoring me in the ISFSI. And I can't thank him enough for all the opportunities that's brought and all the doors that's opened for me. So that's a perfect example, and I wish he were here and could talk about it a little bit more. But a perfect example of a mentorship type relationship that certainly worked out well on my end. So thank you very much for those kind words, Chief Halton. So with that being said, we'll do a quick intro of our one of our regular co-hosts, Steve Shaw out of Fort Lauderdale, and then our guest for today. So Steve, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Shaw. I'm Battalion Chief of Training and Special Operations for Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. I've been with Fort Lauderdale just above 19 years, 23 total in the service, and this is something I'm very passionate about, the training area. I'm really happy and excited to be a mentorship today, both formally and informally. So I'm very, very excited about the incoming conversation.
Brian, tell us about yourself and where you're from, brother.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Leciejewski. I'm from Springfield Fire in Springfield, Ohio. I serve as the Captain of Special Operations here, and I'm honored to be on here today. Appreciate the opportunity. I got a formal program that we run here that I'm interested to share with you guys. I can't wait to hear all your input.
All right, well, easy enough. Well, with that being said, we'll dive kind of right into the meat here of what we kind of wanted to talk about. What I figured we would start with is some discussion about formalized training. So at least to kind of set the foundation for the conversation, what does it look like when someone new comes into your organization? Maybe whether they have previous training or whether they don't, and if there's any difference in that, what your recruit training program looks like, and then kind of what formal processes then follow them immediately out of the academy. So I guess I'll start with my organization, with Dayton Fire Department in Ohio. We run a 6-month recruit academy, and we're currently considering some redesign as far as how that recruit academy is laid out. But as of now, when everybody comes in, kind of regardless of whether you have any previous certification or training or experience or not, we kind of lump everybody together to kind of create that cohesiveness, that team concept in the academy, regardless, as I said, of previous experience and training. And so everybody goes through together as one cohort, as one unit, 6-month process. After that, they remain on probation for another 6 months. And we do have a couple of formalized test periods, one at about 90 days post-academy and another at 180 days post-academy, as well as some pretty formalized evaluation processes and things like that along the way. But once that process is over, once they're off probation, we don't really have a very robust system of tracking them past that. We certainly have a formalized driver and engine operator and ladder operator training program, and an officer development program once we get to that step, but not really a very formalized process of tracking the development of that member as we go. We have established a more formalized mentor program for candidates that are in the process, with a more senior member on the job that is assigned to a potential candidate as they go through our testing process and academy process, as well as post-academy to a certain degree. And so that's been a positive thing for our organization to implement in the past several years. But like a lot of departments, I'm sure there's more that we could do to extend that formalized mentorship, and kind of put a little bit more words on paper or a little bit more hours and time and effort into really formalizing that process post probationary period. So Steve Shaw, let's kick it over to you. What do things look like in Fort Lauderdale for a new member, and how long does it extend into their career?
Pretty much mirror image of what you just said, minus the 6 months. The fact that you have 6 months, I don't think you realize how jealous I am of you right now. We have 8 weeks here in Fort Lauderdale where we get the new candidates on days for training. And even that in this neck of the woods is probably the upper limit. Some other places have 9 or 10 months. Some departments like Miami-Dade, which they hire you right off the streets, or put you into the whole academy for however long it takes, 4, 5, 6 months. But for the majority of the departments here in the Broward County area, it's not that long. It may be anywhere from a week to 4 weeks. We have the luxury of 8. So when I hear 6 months, I get a little chest pain. I'm jealous, but we're still building. But 8 weeks seems to work for us. After 8 weeks of robust training, including mostly fire and EMS training, they go to a pretty detailed sign-off process throughout the next year that includes their paramedic sign-offs plus their fire sign-offs, which is thorough. It's a lot to suck down, however you look at it. But the same thing happens, as you were saying, is after that, it's not that training stops, it's that the formality, the formulation of it stops. And I think that I'm on the same page as you, is afterwards, it's almost like they can choose what they want to do. And I was in the same boat. I think a lot of people find themselves in the same boat. After they get done with probation, it's their choice. Do they get better? Do they attend classes? Do they go to FDIC? Do they start getting involved with organizations? Do they start teaching? Do they start going to the expos and getting involved? Or do they look at that recliner and go, man, that sure does look tasty, and go that route? Or is it a combination of the two? It can fluctuate over the years. So I definitely think more of a formalized process is needed. In fact, it's something that came up at one of our recent staff meetings on professional development and such, about, as a department as a whole, do that. But it's funny that you said what you were saying, because I feel the same way. Our first year is really detailed, and we're proud of that. We're very proud of that. It's just after that first year, could use some freshening up, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that popped in my head as you were saying that, Steve, is I think the earlier you grasp them for the importance, and really try to have them wrap their minds around the importance of professional development and staying engaged early on in their career, the bigger of a seed that's planted early on in their minds, and which is oftentimes set by example, right? By the company officer within the company and the senior members within the company, kind of really, are they going to conferences? Are they going to classes? Are they, reading Fire Engineering magazine as they're sitting around the kitchen table and things like that? Are they setting the tone for professional development and really staying engaged early on that those young members are seeing? One of the things that I would tell members in my company was that everybody needs to have a plan, right? Everybody, especially young members, have a plan. What's next for you, right? What's on your horizon? Do you want to become a fire instructor? Do you want to become an EMS instructor? If you're not a paramedic already, do you want to become a paramedic? What conference would you like to go to? And I can help write recommendations and help, push things through the channels and the chain of command to help make that stuff happen. So what do you want to be next for you? And always have a goal in your head of what's next. If I ask a young member, what's next for you in your career, and they just look at me like I just, ask them a question in another language, then that's a problem, right? If you look at a younger member and say, hey, what's next for you? They should be able to tell you something, right? However, with that being said, an important thing that I learned, and I've even mentioned in a couple of presentations, that I learned from Chief Halton on one of these webcasts. We got to talking about professional development and things like that, and he had a good reminder that bear in mind that not everybody's going to be 100% engaged throughout their entire career. That it's okay for people to have downtime, down periods, and things like that, and as much as I might want to project my passion and enthusiasm on all of my members all of the time and expect that to be followed, the fact of the matter is not everybody's programmed the same way. And so people may have, and you even mentioned it as well, Chief Shaw, people may have peaks and valleys throughout their career, and that's certainly an okay thing. So with that being said, Brian, let's toss it over to you. Tell me a little bit about, I've always been intrigued. Brian's fairly close to my area. Metropolitan Springfield area is very close to the Dayton metropolitan area, and I've always been intrigued by his program. So I kind of wanted to bring him on today to flesh that out a little bit. So Brian, have at it.
So our program here, we have similar with the academy that you have down there in Florida. We've got a 10-week recruit academy that takes them all the way through the fire side of things. We do that again, regardless of their training. If they've had it somewhere else, we bring them on. We want to kind of put them in that team atmosphere, and we want to have that same experience throughout that group, so they kind of have a cohesive feeling throughout. Once they get out of the recruit academy, at that point, we put them into what we call our boot program, which is basic orientation and operations training. So we call them our boots. And that program is a 3-year program. It starts off, it's 10 modules. So over that 3 years, they're going through 10 different modules. The modules start with policies and procedures. So for 4 months, we've got them doing nothing but looking at our policies and our procedures. And then throughout the next 3 years, we move them through pump operations, aerial operations, command training. And we do that with a combination of textbooks. They read a lot of different textbooks that we marry those up with our policies. So for example, in our tactics module that they have to do, we actually use Norman's Handbook of Tactics. They'll read portions of that book, and then they'll pair that up with some of our policies to see kind of how that marries up. Every month, they're responsible for a syllabus type format, and at the end of the month, they have 2 different things that they have to do. They have to do a street school test where we test them on their streets. That test includes streets, Knox box locations, FTC locations, anything that driver operator would need to know to get that officer to where he needs to go. So that's a piece that they're tested on. And then they're also tested on what we call a module test. And that test is an oral-based test that they sit down with the district captain and they review and are basically tested on the knowledge that they learned over that last 30 days. And then at the end of the module, that 4-month module, if we're talking policies and procedures module, at the end of that 4-month time, they have a formalized written test where they actually come down here and they take basically a multiple question test over all the information that they had learned over that 4 months. It gives them, so we pair that up also with senior members. So their senior firefighters are part of that education. They have to actually meet with them at some points to do some of the education. When we get into the pump modules, there's a lot of hands-on stuff that we incorporate in that. And we are also evaluating them. So every month, the officer's sending out an evaluation to the training department. How's this guy doing? What's he need? What are some other things that we can do for this guy? Some of the other things that we do within that program are we have them, part of the projects are reading NIOSH reports, large fire case studies, and then they'll have to do a small report on that. And then after they're all done, right before they get kind of released from our boot program, we do kind of a capstone project. And that capstone project recently here has been them filming training videos. So they're actually taking all the stuff that they've got through policies and procedures, and they're putting all that together in some how-to videos that serve the whole division. Our current one is just some training modules. One of the things I picked up at FDIC, we're making videos and then switching them into QR codes that anybody can kind of pick up, right? So we're using that program for the whole division, but it's bettering and mentoring those younger guys through a 3-year program that's really structured, and we keep track of their grades. We got policies in place that help to guide them through that. And the last thing that really helps us is we have a committee for this whole process that's made up of officers, program admins, people that are currently in the boot program, and then people that just came out of the boot program. We get a lot of feedback from that and a lot of feedback from officers that help us keep it fresh, right? We just went through contracts for our policies and procedures that also test our contract. Lots of questions need to be redone. So there's a little bit there when you have a formalized program to keep it up to date, especially as it's 3 years long. But we have a lot of good guys on that committee that keep our stuff up to date so that we're always getting that up-to-date information.
Yeah, Brian, one of the things that you just said that I really like is that you have your members as part of the completion of the program do something to contribute back to the program, right? Or do something to contribute back to the fire division, to where they're filming a training video or something like that. I like that because they're not only is that a good capstone project for them, but it's a good way to kind of put their face out there and introduce them. You know, of course, 3 years in, they probably pretty much know everybody, but you know, put them out there to everybody in the organization and you know, neat to kind of tie that back in and contribute a little bit. I like that. Yeah,
it's worked really well for us.
So Aaron Heller joined us. I mentioned earlier, Aaron from up in Hamilton Township, New Jersey, that he might be joining us. But please, Aaron, introduce yourself a little bit more formally and give us some thoughts on how things go within your organization for formalized mentoring and training. So we kind of are dividing today up with kind of the first, we're talking formal stuff, training, any kind of stuff that you have in your documents and on paper as far as mentorship and things like that. And then we'll kind of come back around towards the end and talk about the kitchen table talk kind of mentoring. So Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, sorry I'm late, but my college kid figured out my computer glitch, so I'm back. So that works out well. I'm Aaron Heller. I'm a captain in Hamilton, New Jersey. I've been an FDIC instructor for a long time and run a little training company on the side. So I've had a chance to kind of see a lot of this stuff in a lot of different places. In my firehouse, it's not nearly as formal as it should be. We are in the process of a big consolidation, and I see that so many of these things are going to change and so many ideas. It's not nearly as formal as it should be. We are in the process of a big consolidation, and I see that so many of these things are going to change and so many ideas. It's not nearly as formal as it should be.
Aaron?
Yeah, somehow that got weird. Am I still on with you guys?
Yeah, we got some interesting feedback there for a second. We were in an echo chamber there for just a minute. I think we're back.
Okay, I have no idea how that happened, but anyway. So anyway, with that, what we're doing with our probies when we bring them in, the difference between us is we don't run our own academies. So we run our academy guys through different places throughout the state because we're not big enough to do it on our own yet. That's going to change with the consolidation process. But so right now we send guys to Middlesex County, Burlington County, Mercer if it's possible, which is our local, and we go from there. But our last batch has come through Middlesex County. And what we do, they go through the probie school, but when they come to us, they're not ready yet. So they're assigned to a platoon, and what the chief does is basically he assigns the senior man of that platoon to be the mentor of that probie. We've got a probie checkoff sheet that they have to do, basically like a probie book that they have to do, and we go through all of that of that probie. And here we go again. So
Aaron, I think that might have something to do with Tony trying to log on, but I'm not sure. I see his picture at the bottom there.
That would figure. Tony would do that to me.
So
he's been doing that to me for 30 years. Anyway, so our probies go through their probie book with the senior man on the crew who is basically serving as their mentor, and from there the captain on shift is going to review each of those things. So usually they've got somewhere in the area of 6 to 8 weeks when they come out of probie school to review everything back again and how we do it. And then they get assigned to their shift and they become the fourth. We ride 5 when they're probies, 4 is our normal. And that's how we've been doing it. And it's been working out pretty well. The guys have adjusted to it. I think it empowers our senior men, which is really important to me because I remember being a senior guy thinking, I've got a lot to help with this guy. If only I had a position to do it. We make it more official now. So the probie has a little more rigidity, so to speak, a little more understanding of what's required and why we're doing it. But again, I see this developing a lot further, a lot better procedures as our consolidation continues into 2019 and into 2020 would be my guess. So that's kind of how we're doing it right now.
Excellent. Well, hopefully our other guest Tony can join us. I think he was trying to get on, but then was having some login issues there. So we'll see if we can tag him back in here in a little bit. And was giving Aaron some strange feedback there of his own voice. So Chief Halton, I'd like to toss it over to you for a while. What are some of your thoughts on what we've discussed so far, and just in general on the concept of passing it on and passing the torch and mentorship within the fire service?
Well, thanks, Brad. And as usual, in fulfilling my role as the ombudsman of the fire service, which is kind of cool, a couple of things I heard folks say that I think are really kind of interesting. And just to recap, you mentioned a conversation that we had a couple of shows ago, and one of my favorite quotes of all time was from Hemingway. And Hemingway once said, "There's nothing noble about feeling superior to your fellow man. True nobility is feeling superior to your former self." And mentorship and leadership and life in general should be about helping to elevate others to their potential and not denigrating them for the lack of what you perceive to be some shortcoming. They're not into it enough, or they're not, squared away enough, or they don't have enough time, or whatever. It's become a national pastime on Twitter and other social platforms to denigrate people and to beat them up by whatever you think to be their perceived shortcoming is, or lack of understanding as you see it, or the fact that maybe they just disagree with you. So if you're really going to lead or mentor or set an example, I think Hemingway kind of said it best, right? And what's really critical about Hemingway's quote, if you think about it, is that our profession is noble. And that nobility comes from the fact that we're willing to sacrifice our time, energy, our well-being for others. And many of us do it completely voluntarily for no pay, nothing back. And those of us that do it on the career side know that it's fraught with hardship and risk. That nonetheless, we fight for the opportunity to do it, which I think is what makes us noble in the broader sense. And Lasky's calling me in the middle of a hangout, so I'm going to actually answer him so Lasky can hear me talking in the middle of a hangout, which he should be participating in and not trying to interrupt his good friend because he forgot it's not his day, and if it's not his Wednesday, he doesn't care. I'm just teasing. I'm teasing Rick Lasky live on a hangout. I'll call you right back, Rick. So anyway, I love to do that kind of goofy stuff, right? Wait a second, it's my mom. So anyway, as we talk about Hemingway and nobility and the fire service and mentoring, what better example than Rick Lasky, right? That really was Ricky. It's not about you. It's about the mission, the vision, the values. It's about principles. And the number one underlying principle is that the folks that we work for, whether we agree with them or disagree with them, come first. Oftentimes I hear people opining online about, well, they should be paying for more protection. That's not your call. That's their call. We should be explaining to them how more firefighters can help create the fabric of the community and make it stronger, not demanding more resources just because we believe they should pay more. That's not how it works. My good friend Alan Brunesini once said, you can't shit up. So we need to remember that, right? And the second point was wonderful, listening to the chief talk. And Chief, I apologize, I'm not going to try to pronounce that last name. I didn't see a single consonant, a vowel rather, in that last name. I'm just teasing. But when you talk about formalizing a program, what's really great about that is it gives a little bit of structure, right? We all need, life is about finding structure that works for you. And within that mentoring program, as the chief was talking about it with the capstone event, that's wonderful because that gives the individual the opportunity to say, hey, I just took this great program and this is what I took out of it. And because a capstone should be what inspired you in that program, right? What made you connect to that program? And so wonderful idea. And I love that. One of the things that many of these programs have that I really enjoy are reading lists. I like to read, as do many of us. People like to listen nowadays because most books you can get in audio. And so if you look at the United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, the United States Air Force, they always have a reading list that's put together by the commander. So if you're running a mentoring program like Stevens or the Chiefs, you ought to have a reading list that's not mandatory that they read while they're in it, but that's optional if they want to participate in conversation about that ongoing endeavor, right? What is the commander's intent? What's the reading list? I had 5 books delivered yesterday from Amazon, and just because I like to read. And I think it's really critical that we share the ones we really enjoyed, that we create that list, if you will, whether formally or informally. And then I think that the final takeaway that I had from the conversation so far is that sometimes people look at succession planning and mentoring as the same thing. They're not. They're radically different. One is a construct that we have for cultivating people to replace other people as people move through the system, right? It's about making people capable to fit into a position. That's succession planning. When you're talking about mentoring is more about individual growth and development. There's a really cool story out of a small police department in Wisconsin. And they had a bank robbery. 2 bad guys robbed a bank. They were notorious bad guys. They were a father and son team called the Oswalds, oddly enough, weird name. But they they had plans. They were very, very bad people, and they had plans for if the cops followed them, they would shoot the cop, and the other cops would render aid, and they would get away. And so they robbed a bank in this small community, which I apologize, I can't think of the name now. Maybe it's Eau Claire. It may have been Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Anyway, the cops took chase, and they killed a captain named Luntz, Luntz, murdered him, hoping that the other cops would stop chasing him. The cop who kept following them was a cop who wasn't the most passionate guy, wasn't the big SWAT leader, wasn't the big whatever. But throughout his career, he had been mentored and he had been focused. And at that point in time, he did everything correctly. And some of it was not exact. It was exactly the opposite of what the bad guys thought. But it enabled that organization to capture those bad guys. And if he hadn't performed the way he had and got the Valor Award, Meritorious Conduct Award, literally saved the day, it would all have been for naught. The bad guys would have robbed another bank, maybe killed more people, done more bad things. But that individual, whom everyone had perceived as being just part of the herd, if you will, really turned out to be the best of the best. And so as we go through life, what you're doing, what all of you are doing, is so critically important. And all of you, including Anthony, if he can get back on, Tony, who I asked to join us, I think that he's one of those folks who, rather than bash, lifts, rather than critiques, supports, and rather than denigrates, enlightens. And I think that's really, if we're going to talk about mentoring, those have to be fundamental elements. And he's back, mustache and all, and bad hat. So two guys with bad hats on.
Tony, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, Chief Halton was just chatting about you a little bit. So I'm sure we'll kick it over to you, since we haven't had a chance to hear from you yet, Tony, and you were just able to get on here. But the topic of the day is mentorship, as you're obviously aware. So what are go ahead and introduce yourself to anybody tuning in, and give us some of your thoughts on mentorship in the fire service.
My name's Tony Correa. I've been involved in the fire service 42 years. I'm retired full-time, still work part-time as a medic. I do a lot of teaching. Luckily, Bobby, because if you notice the shirt there, I have a kindred spirit, and I'm at FDIC teaching again in 2019, talking about tribal leadership, and actually will deal a lot with mentoring. But mentoring is a passionate discussion of mine. As you know, I taught at ISFI last year in Fort Collins on integrating mentoring into the formal educational process. My part that I really like to discuss, because you've all said some wonderful things, is really starting at the beginning, based on 2 articles I wrote. And the articles aren't based on me. They're based on the experiences I've had and the education I've got from others. And one, we need to build the core values. And I believe the fire service is losing the ability to recognize what their real core values are. And that's why we have a problem building new recruits and even new officers. And in fact, I do a class called the Professional Development of New Recruits and High-Performing Officers. Used to be a mentoring class, but firefighters don't like mentoring. It doesn't sound cool, so we changed the name. Aaron's been to the class, so he can give you input if it's any good or not. The other thing is through the oath. I wrote an article on the oath, and I think that we dismissed the oath. We dismissed the oath in the fact that we don't utilize it as a tool that it was, to make sure that you understand exactly what you're getting into. And an oath shouldn't be, I swear to the Constitution of the United States and the local laws. It should be about your specific organization. And in the professional development class, I actually break down talking about the oath, and to give your new recruits or officers the oath, actually have them write what that means to them, and then have that come back and talk to the officers or leadership or whoever's doing the mentoring. And finally, I believe in having a formal mentorship program where it's outlined what the program is, who's involved, what the mentor's responsibility is, what the recruit's responsibility is, and the interactions between them. So I think it's that structural part that I concentrate on and getting in place first. And one of the things, I think sometimes we rely too much on being field training officers instead of mentoring, because 90% of the problems we have is people problems. I've subjected you even on the fire ground. Problems on a fire ground is not because people are not smart, they don't know their job, they're not tactically proficient. It's an attitudinal thing, and we can cure that by having good core values, a good culture, and following our mission and vision. And I think I did enough of Wawa Coffee to get you started.
No, I'm all that and no mention of the Grateful Dead.
Well, the Grateful Dead is actually we talk about the Grateful Dead, the family of the Grateful Dead. Really, we are a values-based organization, and we do really mentor each other. I mean, Bobby's helped me long, but through this, I've met some other people that have nothing to do with the fire service and help mentor and actually help me develop the formal part of my program. So, what I don't care what your band is. Aaron's Jimmy Buffett. I mean, I like Jimmy Buffett. It could be Megadeth. It could be Iron Maiden. It could be the Eagles. I think all of those musical groups have something. The music has something that you could, and that's one of the things you got to do is appeal to the kids today as to what is it that interests them. Is it the Decemberists or whoever some of these newer bands? See, you don't think I know some of that stuff. Amos Lee, who my wife likes. Find out what that music does and can integrate and has some message that these young guys might connect to, instead of me trying to sell them on Edgar Winter and Rod Stewart.
Yeah, I love it, Tony. And I just brought it up because I think it's one of the most awesome names of an FDIC class I think I've ever heard. The
only reason I did it is to get the people to look at leadership and organizational management from a different perspective. And I asked to have people that don't like the Grateful Dead, hate them, or don't know anything about them, because I think that's one of the problems. Look at things from, we got to stop just reading fire service and military books. We got to look at stuff from a different perspective. Look at all kinds of leadership out there. I read Fast magazine every day. So my point is to look at different places to get inspiration to move the younger generation forward.
Absolutely. No, that's good stuff, Tony. Good stuff. So I want to go back down the line again. And we kind of started with a little bit of discussion on formalized processes and what those look like within each of our organizations. So now what I'm curious about is arguably what's maybe even more important, which is the informal mentorship and the informal, kind of the senior man putting their arm around the junior man and saying, come here, kid, let me show you something, or let's talk about something, kind of that firehouse kitchen table type talk and things like that. One of the things, just one little piece for me that I have enjoyed doing, and this sounds a little morbid for me to ask this question to senior members as they would come through our firehouse, but is myself and maybe some of the younger members of my company would be sitting around the kitchen table or something like that. If one of our district chiefs, one of our senior members of the department that's kind of been there, done that, seen it, 30 years kind of person would come through, I'd politely ask him to sit down for just a minute if I had a younger member there, and just say, Chief, tell me about a fire where you almost died or something like that. And then the chief's eyes kind of light up, and okay, give me a cup of coffee. And then we had this fire up on 5 Oaks Avenue once, and this happened. This is what we pulled up to. This is what we saw. And so from a tactical standpoint, I think it's very important to teach your younger members to be a sponge to the more senior members in the organization. And, sometimes there's bad parts to that as well, right? Sometimes there's, when it comes to attitudes and things like that sometimes people develop over time, that sponge concept as a younger member of the department, you don't want them to sponge in too much of, the city's trying to get us on this one and this person's out to get you and all that kind of stuff. So you got to teach them a little bit to have an appropriate amount of filter, I suppose, for some of the negativity that may come through. But when it comes to history of the organization and tactics and things like that, I think it's very important to teach your younger members to be a sponge for those senior members. Because once that information, that institutional knowledge and knowledge of previous incidents and things like that, once that leaves the department, once that member retires, You know, arguably that's gone forever. You know, you might still certainly have interaction with folks after they leave the job and whatnot, but in general, a lot of that stuff is gone, and we have to try to capture it before it goes. So yeah, that was one of the things that I always like to do. I was at our headquarters station, so I had senior members coming back and forth all the time and just say, "Hey, Chief, tell me about a fire where you almost died," and then just just shut up and let them go. So I think little things like that are important, that informal kind of passing on of information, if you will. So Steve Shaw, I'll kick it back over to you. What about some more thoughts on informal mentoring and that kind of thing?
Well, as usual, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. And gosh, I wish we had like half the day, because everything that you guys just put out there, I just want to pick all your brains on. I will say two things. I think what you just ended off with about how the old timers, the senior folk, those wise ones, as they're leaving, once they're gone, they're gone. And if they didn't pass it on, where did the knowledge go? My wife and I were driving last night, and she said, you know, someone should write a book about all those guys that you work with, because when they're gone, they're gone. So she was literally saying what you're saying right now. And it's truth. It is truth. And I'm hoping she's watching this so I get some brownie points. That's kind of what I'm doing it too. But regardless, a couple things you just said, and I think are important. But before I say that, is the concept of verbalization. And what I mean by that is, I had a training captain here a while back. His name was Matt Green. And when he first started in training, he verbalized to me. He verbalized to the whole group. He said, guys, I am here because I want to surround myself with good people. And it may seem like a simple comment, but nobody had ever verbalized that before to me. I never had somebody actually verbalize that. And I was like taken aback by it. So actually, I give him credit, because every time I do the same thing, I verbalize things. I make sure people hear it from me, because otherwise I just kind of like something, a little note I wrote down. I didn't see it, I didn't feel it, but he verbalized and it meant something. On the concept of mentorship, I think that it's important, and like you said, to not only encourage the newer folk to do it, but on both ends, having the wiser folk encouraging them to be the mentors while encouraging the younger folk to seek out mentors, but verbalize it. Have these guys make sure that it's okay to them. Make sure that they know it's okay to walk up to somebody and say, listen, I want to get better. I want to have some mentorship. I want to know what you know. Give me something. I think it's important to make sure that they know it's okay to step up to folk and do that. I didn't think I had that when I first came on. I thought that maybe I should shut up and listen, and maybe I should have spoke up more and walked up to the senior folk and go, listen, you said this over there before. Can you go a little further with that? Because I maybe didn't get it. And the other side of that is, I guess, the advantage of most of us in the training bureaus, as you guys probably know, we have the advantage of seeing everybody in training. We see everybody. So it's kind of incumbent upon us to take advantage of that. If we see the folk coming in that are new, encourage them to, like you said, be that sponge. That's one thing. Second thing is, as we see these senior folk coming in, remind them, hey, when you leave, your knowledge is gone. Please pass it on. Find some way to pass that knowledge on, that gold mine in your head. Find a way to pass it on, because we need that. So I think the concept of verbalization is my thing I think about mostly, is just not only, you know, encouraging that, but telling people it's okay to verbalize that. Use the word mentor. Use the word seeking mentorship. I think that's just something that, I don't know, it just seems like a lot of people don't know it's okay to put it in words and say it out loud.
No, I love that. I love that. And something else that you just mentioned, and I think is absolutely critical to our conversation, is as training officers, right? As instructors, as people that are engaged in training, we have to set that bar for mentorship, right? We need to be one of the ones that's doing a lot of professional development, that's constantly talking to younger members about what their career path looks like, and encouraging them to take the leap on whatever else is next in front of them. We, in training, probably bear that responsibility to really set that example more so than anybody else. So I think that's really important.
Right. But if I may say one more thing,
yeah,
and you can make it clear, because if I'm going to talk about verbalization, I got to follow suit. So the people on this panel, the people I've been hanging out with, you yourself included, and Chief Halton, everybody on this panel for the last year, and I'm just going to say, and I'm not trying to blow your skirts up or anything, but you've been my mentors over this past year. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. So in case I never said it before, I do feel that way. So thank you guys.
Likewise, Chief. Likewise. Brian, what about in Springfield? What do you like to see informal mentorship wise around the firehouse, with maybe your company officers or your senior members developing people maybe outside of that formal process that you described?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Chief Shaw. The biggest thing is verbalizing it and telling those stories, and just taking that kid or that new guy and saying, hey, let's go out to the truck. Let's learn about this truck. The things that they're not in that packet, right? You got a packet, it's got a check off list, but there's things about this truck, just like turning a knob, right? If you listen to Dr. Griffin when he talks about South Charleston, and just knowing one little piece of his truck would have helped him that day as they were out in Charleston. Those little things that are passed on, not in a formal process, not in a paper, but that senior guy saying, hey, let's go learn out these nuances of the truck. Let's go learn the nuances of the tools. I think those are the best things. I had the other day, we were on a structure fire, and I had a senior guy and a brand new guy. I was safety. The brand new guy we were cleaning up. He didn't have his helmet on. As safety, I start heading over there. And man, if that senior guy didn't do it before I could get there, that's the kind of stuff that I like to see, when that senior guy is saying, hey guy, make sure you're safe on the fire ground.
Fantastic. That is a great example. When you get when the people that you're trying to mentor or teach start to become self-sufficient on their own, I guess, and maybe that's not completely in line with what that example you just gave was, but that was something that I always prided myself on in the company when it comes to company training and things like that. If you are so engaged and passionate about wanting to train and constantly develop and learn, when your brain takes a day off and one of your younger members comes up to you and says, hey, LT, hey, Cap, what are we training on today? What are we doing? Or maybe goes and does some training or something like that, even without you knowing, just with some of the other ones. That's when I think you've really won, is when they start to become self-sufficient with that kind of thing. So very, very cool example. Aaron, let's kick it over to you. What are your, what's some informal mentorship stuff that you like to see in your department?
Well, there's a few things. One thing I want to touch on that Bobby had talked about earlier was succession planning. And succession planning in the career department, I think we've got it fairly well down, because we've got a list of requirements, and we do have the reading list, and we have a test, and in Jersey, our department, we're a civil service based department, so we have a really formal succession plan for the most part, and we know who's going to be what when for the most part. But where I see the difference is in the volunteers, and hopefully we have a lot of volunteers that watch this show, but I know all of us come from a career background, but we all started as volunteers somewhere and still have our mind there at times. And one of the things that I've seen in our region, and I don't like it, and it was something that when I was a volunteer chief, and I was a very young, inexperienced, probably really bad volunteer chief, but one of the things I saw in that was that there wasn't succession planning. Egos got in the way a lot of times. Guys didn't want to get voted out of their volunteer chief spots. So you know what they did? They hid back. They didn't let the guys know all the good information. They didn't feed them everything that they would need to be the next really big leader in that town or in that community. And I saw it with a town close to me, and I watched a fire chief who was very good. He was a good tactician. He was a very smart guy, still is a very smart guy. But I watched his fire department after he left completely eat its young. They were terrible, because what happened was he had never set these guys up for success when he left. He hadn't prepared them to go to the next level. They understood kind of company officer, but they didn't understand the next level. And in a volunteer situation, that is going to kill your department. And I'm seeing it in some other departments in our region, and I'm thinking, God, these guys were so good, and why are they so bad? And it's a leadership thing. It's preparing that next group, and it's us setting back the ego, which every one of us in the fire service has a pretty good size ego for the most part at some point or another. And it's us saying, hey man, I'm not going to do this forever. The years of the 30 and 40-year chiefs in volunteer organizations are really slipping away. Some of those guys still exist, and God bless them, but prepare that next bunch. I can tell you, my last year as chief, I knew it was going to be my last year. So a lot of times I wasn't marking up on the radio and letting the junior officers mark up and run the calls. I still responded. I still watched and what was going on. And a lot of times I just stayed off, watched them, talked to them at the calls. Hey, maybe you should do this. Why don't we do this? And it just let them be the ones in charge. And it's no different in the firehouse. With these young guys in the firehouse today, they are bright. They're, I remember back in Ray's speech, Ray McCormick's speech at FDIC, the famous speech that shot heard around the world. It wasn't just about safety stuff. as though that's what the Twitterverse wants to talk about still when it gets posted up there. Remember Ray said, don't bash those college kids? I was that college kid, right? We're in that same boat now with the probies that I'm seeing in my firehouse. These are bright kids and bright guys. They're not kids. I mean, to us old guys, I guess they're kids, but they're bright guys and they have a lot to bring. And what I'm seeing now is some of my guys that were probies 3 and 4 years ago are now informally mentoring the guys coming through the stations, and they're doing a really good job. I wouldn't say caught, but I've walked into the engine room and saw my youngest guy on my platoon is he's coming up on 3 years now at the end of the year, and he's been a home run. And I love the guy to death. He's a hell of a fireman. He's really learning his trade and becoming a true professional. And I think the next step that I'm watching him take has been with the next probie in. Hey, man, let's go over this pack because you're not quite there yet, bro. We need to work on this. I see this was my deficiency. Let's not make it your deficiency. And he does it in a way. And I actually sat with the chief yesterday, chief of department yesterday, and we were talking. And I said, you know, we've got 3 guys in this building today that when we all retire and come back here 10 years, we're going to be so proud of what they're doing because of what they're doing today. And it makes you feel good that the fire service isn't in as bad a hands as people on, online want to make it out to be. We've still got some brilliant young firefighters coming through the ranks, and we've got some damn fine older guys with a little salt and pepper who are laying it down the right way to them. So, the glass is half full in my book. But again, if we don't do this, it's going to be a problem. And I can tell you, the negativity was the other thing that one of you guys talked about, and keeping away from the negativity. A couple months ago, Bobby talked me off the ledge, right? The phone rings. It's Bobby Halton. It's a Sunday afternoon. And I was pissed off about something, and I let it be known. And an hour and a half later, I went, man, that was so stupid of me. Thank God Bobby called me and talked me off the ledge. Get away from that negativity. And it is hard. It's easy to pick on people. It's hard to build them up. And I tell you, if we can build one guy up a day, we're doing something great in the job. So that's my take from it. Sorry to ramble.
No, that was great, Aaron. And one of the things that you mentioned that I really think is important is humility on the part of the mentor, right? And in that, hey, look, this is what I did once. Don't do this, right? And being humble and having some humility on the part of that mentor and being an open, honest book with that younger member that they're talking to, and teaching by, how do we all learn in the fire service? Oftentimes, think of tactic. Everybody on this panel could sit here and think of something that went really wrong at a fire that they were at once, and that they'll never repeat that mistake again on a fire ground. And so, that's more of a tactical standpoint, but even in terms of personnel management and just interaction with your fellow brother and sister firefighters, be sure to share with that younger member the bad, not just the good as well. So I think having some humility there is good. So Chief Halton, I want to go back to you, Chief, and you've kind of gone full circle in the fire service, right? From I'm assuming started as a volunteer and then a long stint as in the career service, obviously, and then are now back to a volunteer organization. So what are in all of that journey? What are some of the best things that you've seen with mentorship?
Wow, and you're exactly right. Started off volunteering, volunteered on and off during my paid career, and now I'm a volunteer again, and love it. And full-time mercenary with Clarion events and FDIC. I still get paid to do that stuff. I think that the question of mentoring, leadership, personal development, if you think about it, it's as old as time itself. Whether you talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh, or you talk about, which was really the written record of this young man's journey as a mentor, if you will, or a leader of his community, and about how he put that, not collectivism. Collectivism is the bane of humanity. It's the harbinger of the end of a civilization, but rather individual accomplishment and individual contribution to a group is what really makes life worth living, right? Like you talk about collective justice or collective salvation. Collective justice means that you hold other people accountable for things they never did, which is horrible. It's really what builds the communist thought, and it really is what built things. The worst things in the history of mankind came from that. But while you were talking about professional development, it's about the individual, right? And I think that for me, it's come full circle. Great men and women and great loving and gentle people nurtured me and helped me throughout my entire career, whether it was Chief Pronesti or Chief Coleman or Leo Stapleton or Harry Carter or Dennis O'Neill or my contemporaries, people like Tony. Aaron has helped me as much as Aaron's helped me as much as probably anyone throughout my career. So you don't just get advice and grow from folks above you. You often get it from the folks closest to you. That at different times in your life, different people are going to be so incredibly influential and inspiring and take you places you never thought you'd go. But it's about being open to that serendipity of life, right? And always stepping up and saying, sure, yeah, I'll try it. Or, I don't know, let's figure it out together. So some of the stuff that I took away from today's conversation, which I think are really important, is that having a really cool structure, like Anthony talked about, like the Chief talked about, like Steve talked about, is really critical, right? But the other side of it is what Talib has kind of left us with, one of the smartest men in the world, who doesn't believe really in staying within formal education, right? He's got a few doctorates, but he also encourages people to go wherever their minds want to go, right? Whether it's reading, I don't know, who have I got with me today? Whether it's reading Decker's latest or Hofnagel's latest, or whether it's reading, I also just got the latest by Hornfisher, the man who wrote Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. Go wherever, go everywhere. Just go everywhere. Tony talked about leadership lessons from the Grateful Dead at FDIC. Wow, it's like, okay, cool. Who else can we learn from? We can learn from everybody, right? The other thing I took away was, be careful about the preoccupation with quals and certs, because Talib has taught us that, you can see it in engineers, right? Engineers will tell you why you can't do something, right? All the reasons why you can't do that, because that will never work, because the folks that really create stuff go past that, right? So quals and certs are really important. You need to get them, but remember that don't get confined by them or defined by them. The other thing that I got while listening was that one-on-one is the best. The story about walking up to give instruction and then seeing a senior man, again, the chief, you have to teach me how to say your last name. I apologize. But what a brilliant insight. Wow. And there was someone else doing what you were going to do. And if you can give that person secondhand praise in front of the person they're doing it to, you create a chain of like, as Marcus Aurelius told us, being bound to the good, right? True to our colors. And so I really love that. And then I guess, like, I don't know, and don't bash anyone ever, especially because you can. I've done it. I've been guilty of it. And I still do it today. There's a super book. I always mention it. Please read it. It's called Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception. There's also another great book by Dan Ariely, Why We Lie All the Time, Especially to Ourselves, which I thought was a really cool book. But as much as you can, try not to. I did it the other day. I've got to call somebody and undo it because I got into an emotional back and forth with a loved one, with a family member, and it was terrible. And I shouldn't have done it, and I did it. And you got to let those things simmer and clear before you go back and say, hey, that was stupid. I apologize. But anyway, it's just too easy on these social media platforms to be a jerk, to be a bully. I saw it today, and I just left a message with a dear friend of mine because they participated, and I want to find out why. Who cares what someone else thinks or is doing? Or, I mean, leave them alone. I mean, ascribing motive or judging. I mean, you have to. If somebody does something bad, obviously you have to call it out, or evil, yeah, call it out. If you just don't think that they deserve to do it, well, that's pretty. You're pretty darn good. So, I guess. But anyway, that was really cool to hear everybody talk about. If you really want to mentor today, don't be a thug. Don't be a bully. And people get famous pushing people around. And I don't want to be that guy.
That's, yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Chief. That's especially when it comes to some of the social media stuff. Have to just shake my head sometimes. But anyway, Tony, I want to kick it to you for a few last words before we sign off here. Some last thoughts on because you probably got to contribute your 2 cents a little bit more than a little bit less than everyone else. Stumbling over my words here, trying to make up some time, but we're almost out of time here. So Tony, give us a few last words and we'll sign off.
First of all, Aaron and Bobby say that's scary that I actually got less than everybody else. And a smart move to put me at the end doesn't give me that much time. Mentoring really simply is a process, taking away the formal process of where you're helping somebody to grow in all different levels, as well as help you grow and help you mature and become a better person. I think if we just get down to some simple comments that we're all here to help each other get better in their life, and not to give it to them, but give them the tools how to get better, but also learn from them. I've heard a lot of people that I love working with new recruits, whether it's a paramedic or firefighter, because they got the newest stuff and they're going to keep me on top of the game. So mentoring, I do a thing on Facebook, Live on the Lake, every Friday morning. And my goal is just to get people to think and open up and find different ways to help each other and to expand their minds a little bit. But mentoring really is a real simple process. It's basic. Let's get down to concept. Bobby talks about a lot of stuff in past history. A lot of it's been around. It's what we do with our children. We help them grow. We don't do it for them. We help them grow. We support them, but we also learn from them. And having a 26-year-old missionary child who's a hipster, that dude makes sure that I continue to learn from him and that my opinion is not the only one that counts. And as my firefighter son says to me, after I've went 30 minutes and given him explanation of why he should do it based on my 40 years, he goes, "Dad, that's not the answer I want to hear." And my point to that is you need to be able to listen and understand from their perspective. So mentoring, just to close it out, is a process where both people are helping each other grow and get better and expand themselves.
Fantastic, Tony. I appreciate it. Guys, that's we're back at the top of the hour. Thank you very much to all that tuned in. It's been a fantastic discussion, fantastic panel. As always,
Brad, you can go over real quick if the Chief and Steve would like to close out. That we're okay.
Okay, sure. Anybody else that has any final words is certainly more than welcome to. Well, I'm sorry, Chief. I probably kind of set him up to not want to say anything else. So sorry about that.
Hey,
go ahead, Brian.
One of the things, it's funny that we talk about informal and formal leadership, or not leadership, but just mentoring as well. I talked about the fact that I got a really good formal bring up program, mentoring program at the beginning. I wish that we had some formal way for us to help guys at the end of their career, and not even if they're really at the end of their career, right? They're going to keep moving even after they retire, but that gave them some guidance like we give the brand new guy of what to learn, maybe what to pass on as a formalized process.
Awesome.
All right. Well, in the absence of anybody else jumping in, I want to thank Chief Halton and everybody at the Fire Engineering family very, very much. The ISFSI genuinely enjoys the opportunity to have this partnership and get to be a part of the first Wednesday of the month Humpday Hangout Focus on Training. So please tune into these every Wednesday for all of the different topics, but certainly the first Wednesday of every month for training. Tony, yeah, go for it, brother.
Yeah, I forgot, and very important. Starting tomorrow, I'll be at Emmitsburg, as everybody. This is the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend. Please, everybody, take time to reflect on our fallen firefighters, but even more, go to Fire Hero Learning Network and listen to the hero tributes that Tiger Schmittendorf gets recorded. Learn what the essence of families and firefighters go through over the years when they lose their loved ones. So it's one of the most important events in all the year. The fire service is the Fallen Firefighter Memorial. Please, everybody, take time to participate and reflect on those who gave in the ultimate service.
In our business, there's not much more important than that. Thank you very much for those words, Tony. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thank you.